Hi, and welcome to First People's Creating, a Sask music series. My name is LJ Tyson, and I will be your host for the series. I'm joined today by my good friend Tristen Durocher, and Tristen is a well-known fiddle player from here in Saskatchewan, and I'm very, very, very excited to just kind of get to pick your brain, Tristen, and see what's going on in your life as well. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, super excited to have you on the show because you are so diverse in the things you do. I mean, one minute you are playing fiddle somewhere in Canada to hundreds of people, then one minute you're doing something very cool and giving back to the community. So, I mean, let's dive right into it. Back from the start, Tristen, when did you start performing?
So I got my first fiddle at the age of 9. There was a little music store by the river called Frank Elmer's Music. And my grandma, who lives in Prince Albert, she won bingo and said if she won bingo, she would buy me a fiddle. So she stayed true to her promise and she went and bought me my first fiddle. And I've been playing ever since. Yeah.
So is fiddle something that you wanted to do, or was this as like a seed that was planted in your head?
Well, the interesting thing is my great grandfather, Marius Cummings from Northern Saskatchewan, was a fiddle player. And when he had passed away, I was quite young. And at his funeral, one of his best friends came there and played some music on his fiddle. And I thought that was a really special moment. And I kind of fell in love with the music and I really wanted to learn. Um, but nobody bought me a fiddle for the first few years of me asking for one. And finally, after like over a year of persistence, my grandma finally got me a fiddle. So it took a lot of like determination and constant reminders that I really wanted to pursue this. And finally, I got my first fiddle and I started going to fiddle camps in Saskatoon, the John Arcan Fiddle Fest. So I would learn in a group setting all by ear because the instructors, they didn't teach us how to read music because there was no time. It was such a brief kind of 4-day camp that we would just learn in groups. So that was the beginning of my music learning.
So you had mentioned that there's some family influence in your fiddle playing and why you started playing. Who were some of your notable teachers?
So John Arcan from the John Arcan Fiddle Fest, I had taken some lessons with him. Um, in the beginning, there was also a teacher named Shama Sabir from British Columbia, who was a good instructor and someone who taught me when I was starting out. Also, Paddy Kusterock from Manitoba, Daniel Gervais from Alberta, and Calvin Volrath from Alberta. So, like all these really great fiddle players from across Canada would gather at these camps in the summer, and I would take instruction from them and buy as many CDs as I could to try to learn music at home by ear. So it was kind of a whole self-motivated journey of really wanting to learn and get my hands on as many fiddle CDs as I could. So I've had a lot of musical influences. And so the tunes that I play, they're kind of an eclectic mix of like things that you might hear in like the East Coast or even on the West Coast. And I love that. Like the fiddle kind of encompasses all of Canada and every region has a different style. So I'm really eager to learn many other styles because I just love music and also just the diversity of the music that's out there. So this has been a great instrument for that.
What's a signature of Métis fiddle music as compared to, like you mentioned, something from the East Coast?
So what I usually tell students when I perform in schools is that the Métis fiddle goes hand in hand with the dances and square dances and jigging. So it's an instrument to accompany those gatherings and square dances. So it's primarily a repertoire of tunes that are played with the sole intention of being danced to. So it's very danceable, it's very rhythmic, it's very high energy and vibrant and fun, and it really comes alive. So I've enjoyed the Métis fiddle because it is so connected to our communities and our culture, but also just like square dance groups. I love playing for square dance groups and watching everybody dance and jig, and the percussion of their feet helps me with my timing and everything. So that's the distinct difference with the Métis style is that it's for dance.
Speaking of connecting to culture, you've been such a champion of culture and of and of our people. And I just number one want to say thank you for all the work you've put in just publicly. You know, Tristan's actually done a lot and been such a strong voice. But do you find it hard balancing the line of activism and music, or does it kind of go hand in hand and it's just natural to you?
Yeah, well, that's a tough one. Um, like a lot of the activism that I've done has been about the need to support youth and people in our province who are dealing with um, mental illness and have a lack of services there. But aside from that, like my performances and my music, it's always in schools, it's always in communities, it's always at culture camps, and it always ties back to like young Northern people being the audience. And so because I travel to those communities, I teach a lot of these young people music, and I start to like, know them and care about them and their well-being. And so naturally the activism just became this natural response to having a lot of care and concern for our Northern communities, but just our people more generally. So I don't see them as in conflict with each other. As a matter of fact, I think they complement each other really well because music could be so healing and it's like an emotional language. So if somebody's dealing with some difficult things emotionally, they might not have the words to express everything that they're going through, but if they play an instrument, they could really get it out musically. And it's like this very kind of cathartic healing thing. Um, so I don't know. I see everything as very connected and I don't see it as in conflict with each other. Um, and being a musician, I think gives me more freedom in the activism world because I could be like more critical about certain institutions or organizations because I don't like work for them. And I'm paid by other funding streams and grants and things and communities. So like I'm never worried that like, oh my God, I might get fired if I talk about this issue and how some organizations bear some responsibility and need to be doing more because I don't rely on it. Like I get to just go and play my little Red River jig and play for some dances and life continues on. So yeah, it's made me kind of brave in that respect.
Yeah, if it was easy, everyone would do it. Do you ever do you ever fear speaking up or using your voice, or are there any times when you are kind of just like, oh, I don't know if I should say something, or I don't know if I should have said that, or is it like it just happened in the moment?
Yeah, okay. So I do a lot of writing and I've been journaling since I was young, like since I was a kid. And so I've always kind of been reflective and kind of comfortable using my voice. Um, But what I always kind of go back to is like the intention behind what you're saying or what you're doing. Sometimes because of injustice that I've witnessed and or read about and or experienced, I get very angry, and anger is like this natural response. In our society, I feel that people are like kind of shamed or even like stigmatized if they're speaking from an angry place. But when it comes to like some things that have happened to First Nations people in Canada, I feel our anger is valid and it's righteous and it's okay. But at the same time, we need to be careful when we're speaking from a place of anger that we're not using our capacity for language in like a destructive way. So, yes, sometimes I get pretty angry, pretty hot-tempered, and I'm writing things and saying things. Um, but I just need to get it out. And a lot of things I'll write and not share. But when it comes to sharing and speaking about things publicly, I always try to do it from from like a clear and grounded place. Like I know if I'm not in a good emotional place, I don't want to speak to media or people and do interviews because I can say something that maybe will sound a little bit too um, attacky or divisive. So I don't know, it's a hard balance, but Like when it comes to speaking out about things that you care about, just start with the truth, and that will be enough. You don't need to add anything else. Just share the truth of your experience or your reality or things that you've seen. And if people want to criticize or attack that, what they need to understand is that like you're bringing awareness to issues and things that you feel are unjust, and that's what they should be angry at, not the messenger.
100%. I agree. I think it once again, I'll just say it takes a lot of bravery, because I mean my brain, how it works is always going, if I say the wrong thing, then I'm going to um land myself in hot water, or if I accidentally say this or I get too tempered. So once again, I just want to commend you for um doing a great job of that, because like I said, I'll echo it again and again and again. If it was easy, everyone would do it, and you're doing just a terrific job, because not only are you balancing a wonderful career as an amazing fiddle player, but you have the social activism as well going, and I think I admire that. So thank you for doing that. Another thing I need to thank you for is giving back to the youth, and you're teaching in schools and you're teaching in communities. And how did that come about? How did you start doing that?
Well, the interesting thing is my mother is a teacher. So even when I was in school, before I had a license and I used to travel and perform in schools, she would invite me into her class to play for her students and share some music with them. And they absolutely loved it. And other teachers in our community started noticing, like, well, maybe we should invite him into our classrooms and he could play some music for them. And I did that from a very early age. So I'm very comfortable in the classroom environment. Like it doesn't intimidate me to have a crowd of students. But in recent years, after graduating and working as a musician, like I've noticed there's good opportunities available to teach music in schools and fiddle in schools. So I've taught for like school divisions in Northern Manitoba and in Northern Saskatchewan and even in the Northwest Territories. And all over, like I noticed that young people are very curious about the fiddle, and it's a challenging instrument. It sounds absolutely terrible when you're a beginner. So it gets them motivated to like try to sound better each time, and every time they try, they sound a little better. And I like that it builds their confidence and really gets them in a state of like goal setting and from like a good healthy motivation.
So when you're teaching a student, Tristen, what's one piece of advice that you always um, share with them?
Well, I tell them that the fiddle is one of the most difficult instruments to learn. So they need to be patient with themselves because it's not going to sound great right off the bat. But if they just keep at it, they're going to sound a little better each time. So it's just about not giving up and staying motivated. Um, Also, the fiddle is like a very sensitive instrument. So, like, if you pushed too hard with the bow, it's going to sound very scratchy and awful. So I always like to give them a demonstration on the first class of all of the terrible sounds a fiddle can make, like the worst mistakes you could make on a fiddle, so that they know what it sounds like. And then I ask them to try that. So then when they hear how a fiddle could like be very scratchy and awful, they're like, okay, well, it literally can't sound any worse than that. So let's move on and try to sound better.
Thank you so much, Tristen, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to talk to us here today at First Peoples Creating. Is there anything you want to leave our viewers with? Any message, any shout outs?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for having me. And also just remind um, aspiring Indigenous musicians to not let the imposter syndrome sneak into your work. Because sometimes I'm invited to do things and I'm quite intimidated by them and think, oh no, they don't need me. They could get somebody else. But it's like them asking you is them saying that they think you're valid and you're worthy and you deserve to be there. So go to the places you're invited, and you'll be surprised by how welcoming and kind the people could be.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tristen.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Bye.